Welcome into The Mic is Open. I'm Hoshida. This is the last podcast before the regular season starts for the San Jose Sharks. The NHL season starts on October 8th. San Jose Sharks season starts on October 9th, which is all great news. But the bad news is that means we're going to take a back seat to my regular job. So expect 1 to 2, maybe 3 podcasts a month if we can swing it. We shall find out. I will keep you all posted. But right now, we are excited because the San Jose Sharks are maybe everyone's favorite team other than their favorite team in the National Hockey League. Everyone wants to see what Macklin Celebrini is going to do year 2. Will Smith's going to do in year 2. The prospect pool. Is Michael Misa going to make the team? There's plenty to talk about. So we had to bring in one person, Randy Hahn, the voice of the San Jose Sharks, pretty much since the inception. He's called over 2,000 games for the franchise. And we're going to talk about the team. We're going to talk about training camp. We're going to talk about his career and how he took a job in San Diego that kind of changed everything. And we're also going to get a little dad advice because, of course, that is what we do on The Mic is Open. All right, Randy Hahn, welcome into The Mic is Open. We're getting geared up for the season, starting in just a couple of days. So I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll get to some Sharks hockey and talk about all these things.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, so first and foremost, obviously, Mike Grier did a lot to the team itself, but if you go back, the biggest thing this offseason is maybe that new lease agreement for the franchise, and they have budding superstars coming up their way. The pipeline's rich. There's a new wave of fans coming because of the youngsters. The old fans are still there. So simply, what's the health like of this franchise right now as we enter 2025, 2026?
I think it's very strong, and you make an excellent point about the new 25-year lease and the $500 million that's going to be committed to upgrading what I really think is still a great arena. I think San Jose Arena, SAP Center, as we know it in the current form, has really held up well over essentially 35 years when they started building it 35 years ago. Does it need some sprucing up, obviously, and some more creature comforts? And as the organization grows and the game progresses, it needed to be updated. But the fact that that's sealed, signed, and soon to be delivered is very exciting news. And that, coupled with what you just articulated, the young talent in the organization, and not just the young talent. Let's be honest, on the top of that list is a potential NHL superstar in Macklin Celebrini. He's only 19, but even his peers, much older than he is in the NHL, in a recent survey, agreed that he quite potentially could be the next poster boy of the NHL in a few years going forward. So to have that piece and then have all the layers beneath Macklin, along with everything else off the ice, is really exciting. And the last 2 years have been tough. Last year was more exciting because Macklin and Will Smith arrived on the scene to join William Eklund and some of the others. But now it's taking another step toward getting back to playoff hockey at SAP Center, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised about how good Macklin Celebrini was by the end of the year because we saw it coming, but I was kind of surprised about just the amount of respect he's already garnered from his peers and how that's kind of carrying him into this training camp. And it's the second training camp for Ryan Warsofsky. What have you taken away as it's about to wrap up here? We're wrapping up, getting into the regular season. It's very competitive. What have you thought so far?
Well, it's been a little unusual because of the absence of actual games early in training camp. There was a stretch there where the Sharks had played one preseason game and other teams in the league had played 4 or 5. And then at the end of camp, the training or the preseason schedule really ramped up for the Sharks. So I think it was tough on the coaches to try and maneuver that, navigate that, if you will. And also for the players, because there were just lots of days of practice. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there were scrimmages and sometimes even more than we thought there were going to be. There were some scrimmages thrown in at the last minute by Warsofsky and the staff, but that's because they just weren't playing enough games. And the players were getting bored and frustrated with that, as were the coaches, but nothing you can do about that except work your way through it. I think that the absence of Celebrini for virtually all of the camp, except for the last preseason game, was a concern, is a concern. And then, especially when you couple it with the fact that after the first game last season, he got hurt and basically missed the first month. So you much would have rather seen Macklin in there and healthy, but nothing you can do about that now. But there's always a flip side to that, and it opened up opportunities, especially at center ice, for people to showcase themselves a little bit more, like Michael Misa getting more rotations at center ice, playing with top line players and others. And you saw a player really battling for a spot at center ice coming into this camp, Ty Dellandrea, getting more ice time because of the Celebrini injury and the trickle-down effect, and really grabbing hold of that and making a statement that he intends to be back this season as a key part of this hockey team. So it was a good camp. I wouldn't call it a great camp because of the Celebrini injury and the other scheduling issues that you talk about. But you know what? 2 weeks from now, we won't care. Because we won't even remember the record. We might remember that Ethan Cardwell had a hat trick against Vegas and how good a win that was, considering the lineup the Sharks had in that game against the Golden Knights and the fact that Vegas pretty much had their top team in there. That was a nice win, but it also doesn't mean anything because once the games start counting, you sort of park the preseason and forget about it.
Yeah, last year was Danil Gushin who kind of forced his way there into the opening lineup with 4 assists against the Knights, and Ethan Cardwell a hat trick. It really seems like there are some pieces that you're looking at here as rosters need to be announced on October 6th that who is going to be in and who's not going to be. It's maybe more interesting cut down days that we've seen in the last several years from the San Jose Sharks.
Well, yeah, and you're speaking to internal competition, and that's something that quite honestly, has been lacking in the last couple of years. But as you begin drafting and developing players like Celebrini, like Smith, like Dickinson, like Misa, earlier in the process, William Eklund, giving a real test to a Luca Cagnoni to see if he's getting closer to taking that step to the NHL. And then surrounding that group with a new crop of veteran players. And I think the defense is a better veteran defense, at least on paper it is, and we'll see how that rolls out. And the goaltending is completely different. Well, not completely, because we did see a little bit of Askarov last year, but not on a regular basis. So you're going to have a brand new starting tandem. I wouldn't put Askarov ahead of Nedeljkovic at this point because we just don't know how it's going to go. I think it's 50-50 going in, and then you earn your next start. But obviously Askarov is projected to be the future number one for the Sharks. But I think if you put all the pieces together, the internal competition is different now. It's more profound, and there are more jobs on the line, and coming up with that final roster will be a bigger challenge. The flip side of that, and there's always a flip side, is that no matter what happens, the San Jose Barracuda are going to be, at least on paper again, a much better looking team than they were a year ago, and they made the playoffs last year. So that will benefit that next, crop of developing players, young players who will have an opportunity to be part of a winning environment in the American Hockey League, and that can only help.
Organizational depth is needed. We saw every year injuries happen, especially when you have veterans. Sometimes they'll break down and you need someone to step up. So having a Cagnoni, whether he makes the team out of camp or not, having him there ready seemingly is going to be a good problem for the Sharks to have. Musty had a good camp. Macklin Celebrini, you talked about it, hasn't played in the game yet. He's going to play in the final one, get out there, but he has been practicing with the team. He played the opening night, his very first NHL game. Then we didn't see him for 12 games. So what are we concerned? How concerned should we be with the franchise centerpiece?
Well, I don't think we should be concerned because he'll have played in one preseason game at the end of preseason. At this point, I don't know why he was out. At one point, we thought he was ill, but it seems like it was something more than somebody just had a cold or the flu. You don't miss all of training camp because of that. Or he didn't miss the camp, but didn't appear in any preseason games, and there was a lack of contact and a lot of the practices where he had the yellow sweater on, and that's the put on the break sweater for the rest of the guys on the team. But if he's good to go for game one, then he's good to go for game one. Obviously, you're always concerned about all your players and their health, and there's a little extra because Macklin got hurt at the beginning of last season. But that's just the sport. That's the game, and people get hurt. And you just hope for Macklin and for the whole group that they're healthier than they were last year. Macklin last year played 71 games, fell a little shy of a point a game, which at 18 years old is remarkable. And it would be very exciting to see if he's able to play a complete NHL season and see what he can do. Can he average a point a game? Can he do even better than that?
Still 19. Will be 19 all year. So 2 teenage seasons for the San Jose Sharks. What is the next step for the Sharks? Last year, the product looked better. Everyone agreed it looked better. The vibes were good inside the dressing room. You guys said it on air that it was the most fun last place team the NHL's ever seen. But now, is there a new step that needs to be taken for the rebuild to be officially over and they start moving forward into this new era of Sharks hockey?
Well, I think the rebuild is over. It's now the build. Mm-hmm. And you've got a baseline, and you've got an organization that appears to be very deep with talent that in a lot of circles around the NHL is considered to be the number one talent pool not playing in the NHL, along with the guys who are like Celebrini and Smith and Askarov and some others. I think you have to start with the start. The last 2 years have been brutal. Yeah. And the Sharks have gone 7, 8, 9, 10 games into the month without a win. And that needs to change. But it's easy for me to say that. It's harder to do that. You look at the Sharks schedule going in, and of their first 3 games, they play 2 Stanley Cup contenders in Vegas and Carolina. So those are going to be huge tests. The good news is those are home games. And then they go to Utah to start their road season. And that's going to be a huge challenge. A lot of people think this is the year that the Mammoth will make that move and take that step and be a playoff team. So it's not going to be easy. If you're looking at the schedule for a game against a team that's maybe on the way down in a lot of people's estimation, that would probably be the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they still have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang and others. So It's not like they're just going to lay down and be roadkill for a team that was 16th in the Western Conference last year. But having said all that, you get through the end of the month and a tough road trip through the New York area, ending up in Minnesota against Kaprizov and the Wild. The Sharks need points in October. Obviously, just from a standpoint to stay in the mix of the teams in their division. I mean, you don't want to go into November already being 8, 9 points out of first in your division. It's a downer. It's a downer for the group and for the fans and for everybody else. And it puts you in such a tough spot to try and make those points up later on in the year. It may happen and they may have to go through that again, but here's hoping they don't. To me, that's the first step. I think the second thing that has to happen, and it ties into that, is better play in third periods when they have leads or going into those periods tied. They had the worst record in the NHL last year when they were tied or at a lead going into the third period. They didn't close out those games. They took badly timed penalties. They took risks when they didn't have to. They played like a team that didn't know how to win. And clearly, they were a team that hadn't made the playoffs for 5 years in a row, and they had some teenagers in their lineup. I think that is a real focus for Ryan Warsofsky this year, is they being in those games, because they were in a lot of games that they could have won, and this year doing a better job, even if not winning those, getting a point by taking them to overtime or finding a way to win a shootout here or there where they weren't that good at last year. I think that's obviously another focus as well. So those are two things I'm looking at early on, is how they start the month and how they finish games in that month.
Yeah, and preseason week, like you said, in a couple of weeks we'll look back and won't remember, but They're 2 wins the preseason. They've had leads in the third, and they've closed out those games. So yes, it's preseason, but at least they're building that habit and finishing off those games as you can. You yourself, you're coming back again, and you're the voice here for the NBC Sports California. You've been through all the iterations of the channel itself. What still gets you excited for the start of the season?
Well, it's the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's why this is the greatest job that I can imagine, because you get to go to work most days and there's 17 or 18,000 people there with their kids or their husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or their friends from work or whatever the case may be. They're there to have some food, some drinks, some fun. And once the puck drops, it's the great unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be another run of the mill game? Are you going to see something you've never seen before? Will there be a record? Will there be a thrilling comeback? Will there be a heartbreaking loss? It's the great roller coaster that is this job, and I've always called it a roller coaster wrapped up in a soap opera each season, because it usually is. There's ups and downs, and there's a myriad of stories that emerge throughout the year, many of which you wouldn't have expected. And that adds that soap opera element to it and keeps us so engaged from training camp in September, hopefully through to a Stanley Cup in June someday. So that excites me, the great unknown and the opportunity to see these players do what they do. And I'll be honest with you, Alan, I'll be 67 this year. And the thing that I still love so much about this job is I get to be around these young players and 18 and 19-year-olds and watch them. I mean, they're much younger than my own sons. And I always harken back. I was there for Patrick Marleau's first day, and I was there for his last game as a Shark and then watched him retire. He moves on to work for the Sharks off the ice, and I get to stay. So it's really fun to see entire careers, see these young players, be around their energy, be around their culture. And I don't think they quite relate with me quite the way that they did 20 years ago when I was a lot closer to the ages of the veterans. But it really helps keep me alive, vibrant, young, if you will, at least in my mindset. And I look forward to all those things each and every year, starting again with this season.
I just think your passion, it comes through every time you call a game, but just when you talk about hockey, when you're around the rink, when we talk, it's still there. And that fire's still there. I think anybody who has the career that you've had, the length of your career, that's something that stands out to me, is just their passion. It never wavers. And you talked about stories too. One thing, you tell stories and they're great. If it's Jamie, if it was Brett, if it's Drew, how do you approach that when the team is better compared to, the last couple of years when they're bad, and you get used to how you want to say that and to have it come across on air?
Well, first of all, it's of the major sports, it's probably the most difficult to weave in storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
because so much happens so quickly, and transition can occur in the split second on a turnover, and all of a sudden you think you have time when the puck is in the neutral zone between the blue lines to tell a story, and you're a few words into it, and all of a sudden there's a scoring chance. So we're always mindful of that, to stay with the action and be aware of what's going on the ice at all times. But you try and work the storytelling in as well, and I think it is important. It's important for what you do in pregame and intermission and postgame, storytelling and interviewing and the stories that come out of those things. But as far as winning and losing, there's always good stories. Sometimes there are unfortunate stories to tell, but those are part of it too. And that goes back to my comment about it being a roller coaster. It's not all good. It's not linear. The Sharks aren't going to go on this straight trajectory back into the playoffs in a straight line. It's not going to be that way. It never is for anybody. There's zigzags along the way, and through that come stories, and those need to be told, or many of them do. And the other side of it too is, in years when the team hasn't performed very well, and there's obviously been more of those in the last 5 or 6 years than I ever witnessed consecutively before this stretch since 2019. Rather than focusing on the negatives, when the Sharks give up a bad goal or lose a tough game, you know, you can talk about what can be learned from it, and these are more things that my analysts do, and that's primarily Drew Remenda, and he's so good at that. But you know what? You have to give the other team credit too. They just
Hmm.
beat you. They just scored a great goal, and I think part of storytelling is telling the stories of the other players in our league as well. It's not just the San Jose Sharks and a bunch of anonymous guys. There's a lot of great stories, a lot of tremendous athletes who deserve credit for when they do things very well, even if it happens to be uh, a negative in a Sharks game. If a star player from the other team has a big night, I think those stories need to be told as well, and that's to me just the respect that I know Drew and I know I certainly have for all the players in the NHL. It's such a difficult job. It's a dangerous job, but it's so exhilarating and exciting to see it done at the utmost level. And I think players on both sides deserve credit when credit is due.
Drew's with you most of the time. You've had Jamie, you've had Brett, and then during intermissions, you have new guys come in and out. How do you kind of, for me too, it's this year we're gonna have a stable of analysts. How do you approach kind of getting the best out of your analysts while also maintaining your poise and what you want to do, but knowing that you want to make their job as easy as possible?
Well, this year I'll have Jamal Mayers for
Yeah.
maybe 10 games as well, doing color on the broadcast, former Shark player. And, I think it has something to do with relationships. You have relationships with these people going back, and you know them off camera, and sit at morning skates and practices and on the plane or on the bus and in the hotel and at dinners and whatever, and you build a rapport. But then there's other instances. I can think of one in particular. A couple of seasons ago, I did a game on TNT, and I worked with Patrick Sharp, the former Stanley Cup champion with the Chicago Blackhawks, and just a great player. And I didn't know Patrick Sharp. I might have asked him a question in a scrum a time or two over his career in the NHL, but all of a sudden I'm in a broadcast booth with Patrick Sharp. But as a player that played as long as he did and won championships, and for me as a broadcaster who did many games that he was in and has been around the league for a little while too, there's a common language.
Hmm.
We know the game, we know the league. I'll come armed with things that he might not be as skilled with, like recognition of number, name, pronunciations, stats, things like that, and he'll bring his insights into the game and particular plays and strategies and things like that are not my forte.
Right.
And I found more often than not, and Patrick hasn't done a lot of television color. He was tremendous when he worked with me, and now he's working in hockey management. He's not doing broadcasting anymore. But I just use him as an example of somebody that can slide in and be comfortable and kind of have instant chemistry because of our common bond of being in the league for a while, even though we don't really know each other that well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point is building relationships with the people you're going to be working closely with it and then not just the work relationships, because I think it helps you, you know, find that comfort in what you're asking and being able to speak the way that you want to do. And it's something that I'm working on now with everyone that we get to work with daily in our side of things. But I'm still going into my second year, right? I'm still finding my footing, finding what my voice is going to be, who I'm going to be. What is your best advice to young broadcasters or play-by-play when they reach out to you, they send you a demo, whatever it may be? And has that kind of changed over the years, or has it still kind of stayed consistent no matter how the media landscape has changed?
I think because of what we do, play by play, it's stayed fairly consistent.
Hmm.
And the difference between what I do and what a sports anchor does on your local news or on ESPN is that person has a script that's on a teleprompter. It's been written usually by that same person, and they read that script and do the highlights and so on. What we do is not scripted. It's
Yeah.
an ad lib. It's 2.5 hours from the top of your head of just letting go and reacting to what you see see it, and say it. And what I tell young broadcasters, and I have a lot of uh, young guys and girls that contact me all the time from around the country, asking for tips, wanting half an hour of my time to chat on the phone about it, and I'm always happy to do that. Um, Number one, it's repetitions. And you don't instantly come out of the womb good at this. It takes a while. Now,
Yeah.
there are other people out there who are more talented than some others, and they take to it more quickly. But inevitably, you have to do it. You have to get the words out of your mouth out loud and be comfortable with that. And what I tell them, if they're not in a current broadcasting job, but they want to get into it, I tell them to record games of the sport that they're interested in. Let's say they're hockey fans. They want to do play by play of hockey and maybe someday in the NHL. Record games, build yourself a chart. I have my chart of all my players and their names and things like that, or the depth chart or the line chart, and watch that tape with the sound turned down of the original announcers that were on it. Turn on the recording mode on your cell phone and record yourself calling that game.
Mhm.
You have to do that at some point. It has to come out, uh, uh, until you actually get a paying job where you're doing that. How else are you going to do it? So I encourage young people to start the process that way. Maybe start your own broadcast uh, of a San Jose State hockey game or a high school hockey game and put
Mhm.
it online for friends and family of that particular team to listen to. You're not going to get paid to do that, but you're going to start doing it. And you're probably not going to be very good at the beginning, but that's part of the process. I mean, the
Yeah.
first thing I ever did live was a dog sled race. And people say, oh, the Iditarod. No, that's the top of the food chain in the dog sled racing business. You don't start at the top. You start with the Yukon River Whitehorse Sourdough Rendezvous race, which is what I did when I was 15 years old. You have to not be afraid to do something like that. You're going to hate the way you sound, quite likely, and you're going to make mistakes, most likely. But that's how you get better at doing this. Repetitions, and then the other thing I find, unfortunately, is there's a lot of people, and this tells me they're not really, really committed to it. I'll say, you have to be willing to go anywhere to accept that first job. It might be in Timbuktu, it might be in Peoria, Illinois, it might be in the middle of nowhere, Texas, but you have to be willing to pick up and go. And these people say, oh, well, I would never want to leave the Bay Area. Well, then good luck, because
Yeah.
this is one of the top media markets in North America. And last time I checked, there's only two play by play jobs in this market in hockey. So, good luck to you on that. Well, three, including the Barracuda. You've just limited your options to almost nothing. So people who really want it are willing to pick up. They're willing to go. They're willing to take almost no money at the beginning, because that's going to happen too. But the struggle is what makes the success so much sweet later. So that's the advice I give people: reps, and be willing to go anywhere.
I was
Pack a bag and take off.
I was one of those kids. I was like, I'm not going to leave the Bay Area. Or after college, I went down to Monterey, all the nice, Salinas, just down south. I was like, I could get into one of these markets. It didn't happen, and I ended up going to Humboldt, and I decided, that's what I'm going to do. And I think it's a good message also because you start learning so much more about the country, about the people, and you're so pigeonholed in the Bay Area. It is so diverse, but you get to see so much else. So I encourage everyone, even if you think you don't want to, open up your minds and go somewhere else. But we also all have kind of a pivot point in your career where it's like you knew you're at a fork in the road and you had to make a decision. It was tough or whatever it may be. Is there a moment that stands out to you in your career early on that was your fork in the road, that was your pivot point?
Probably two. When I was going to college, and I graduated from high school when I was 16. So by the time I got to college, I took a break here to work, and I was kind of young to go off on my own to college at 16. So I worked for a year in radio, and then I went to the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. But at the same time, I got a job in Vancouver part-time and eventually full-time working in radio there. And I was just a radio sports reporter, interviewing at Vancouver Canucks games, things like that. It was already a great opportunity at a young age of 17, 18 years of age, working in a big market like Vancouver of a couple million people. But one of the gentlemen who was a very well-established broadcaster, and you could look him up, his name is Steve Armitage, a longtime CBC broadcaster in Canada, many Olympics, things like that. And he's retired now. But we were talking about the industry once, and he gave me the best advice I ever got. And he said, if you ever get a chance to do play-by-play, do it. He said, and then again, this goes back to being able to read scripted things off a teleprompter or being able to ad lib, which play-by-play is. He said, if you can learn the art of play-by-play, it doesn't matter what sport, if you can figure out how to talk for a couple of hours without a script, you will be able to handle all those other things in the broadcast industry a lot more easily than those guys and women who have never done play-by-play. And it's very true. It's very difficult when studio anchor type people get offered a play-by-play position for the first time. They're deathly afraid of it because of the very reason that they have to wean themselves off a teleprompter and be able to just pull it off over 2 or 3 hours without that. So that was a turning point for me, and I sought out play-by-play after that, and I got my first steady play-by-play job in my next stop in Edmonton doing soccer. And the other pivotal thing for me then was in 1982, I was doing professional soccer for the Edmonton Drillers in the NASL, and the franchise folded, the Edmonton Drillers. So I still had a good job in Edmonton doing TV and radio sports, but I lost my play-by-play job, which was something I really enjoyed. And there was an opportunity to move to San Diego, to the San Diego Sockers. And all I had to do was move from Edmonton to San Diego. That part was easy, but the cut in pay was 50%. But you know what? I was 23. Money shouldn't matter to you that much at any time, but certainly not when you're that young. And it didn't to me. And I saw the opportunity as much more important as dollar signs. And I took the job. And I was lucky enough that my immigration situation was able to be worked out by my employers. And I made that move from Edmonton to San Diego. And that kind of led me to the LA Kings, which I worked with for a couple of years, and eventually the Sharks job. So one was taking the advice to learn play-by-play, and the other one was what I articulated before. Be willing to pack a bag and uproot yourself and leave. Now, it was San Diego, so it wasn't that tough. Yeah. It's not called America's finest city by accident, but you have to be able to be willing to do that at some point in most circumstances if you're going to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, we do pre and post, and I'd say it's mostly ad lib, but it's only 25 minutes. And last year it's a transition to get off of your scripts and knowing how much you want to put in your head and not put in your head and go into it. And so that stands out to me. And then also, yeah, when I was a AP at CSN, Comcast Sportsnet, you're making like 40 grand, which has a 20 whatever. That's great. But then going to Humboldt, it was 21 grand. So you're taking that 20, that's half your pay. But this was a question that was staged to me at a roundtable. This is an investment in your career, right? Like, not always your return on investment is going to be right off the bat. It's something that you have to put equity in, and down the line, if you do things the right way, if you work your butt off and you have a little bit of talent, hopefully it'll be paid off. So I hope people who listen to take that and see, the next generation, you don't have to hit it big on your first check.
You won't. And I think you make a very good point that the opportunity at that young age and the repetitions you're going to get in a place where you won't be scrutinized quite so harshly for making mistakes is worth far more than dollars.
So the last thing we do on the Mic is Open, of course, with Randy Hahn, the great Randy Hahn, voice of the San Jose Sharks, is I like to talk about dad advice because I'm a new dad. I have a 4-year-old and a 16-month-old. You've been through the ringer. Yours are a lot older than mine. And so I got to get some advice here. What are the most challenging stages for you? And what should I be looking out for here as we move forward?
Well, my challenges were probably a little different than yours because of the amount of traveling that I've been doing over the
Yeah.
last 35 years and being away from family. The flip side of that was, for the most part, I had the summers off with some occasional other assignments and other sports, but that was simultaneous with obviously when my kids were out of school. So that was a real bonus for me. I was able to make up for lost time in the winter when they were busy with their school lives and make up for it in the summer. But time is the most valuable thing, and that's where you build bonds. And another thing I regret not being able to do, for the most part, that I would encourage is if you have an opportunity to coach or help coaching your daughters or sons, if they are inclined to be in sports, take that opportunity.
Hmm.
Take the course that gets you certified, or if it even is that, or if the t-ball coach for your child's team needs some help from time to time, take that opportunity. There's nothing better than those moments when you share that time with your children, when they go through struggles, when they go through disappointment, when they go through success, or when they go through elation and making friends, to be there alongside them during those times. For me as a father, I regret not being able to do it as much as I could. I tried to make up for it with taking them to as many Sharks games and around the dressing room type environments as I could, but because of my schedule, I just couldn't be for example, their hockey coach or their assistant hockey coach. And I really wish I could have done that. And that would be a regret for me. And I would encourage everybody, if you have the chance and you have the time to do it, you may not think you can do it, but you'll learn and you'll find that those are some of the most valuable moments you can imagine with your children.
I love that. We're doing a co-op preschool, so one of us has to go to school at least once a week with them and be a parent teacher. I've gone a couple times. My wife does the heavy lifting on that, but you're right. It's just really cool to be there when you see them start socializing and learning, and also you get to be around their friends and you get to kind of do your own background checks in real time. So that's also a little plus to all that. But you also said, summer. And that's one thing about the shark season that I'm realizing is it coincides with the school calendar, which is great. But then summers, you have it opened up. So is there an activity that you really love to do with your kids that you would say is your favorite father-son bonding experience?
Well, we used to do all kinds of things, and when they were playing hockey when they were younger, and they're in their 30s now, so they have their own lives and things to do in the summer. But they would love to go to hockey school up in Canada, and I had the flexibility to load up the truck and drive up to British Columbia and be up there for a couple of weeks with them and go to hockey school. They played roller hockey in Livermore in the summers, and it sounds like a lot of hockey, but it was baseball too. It was
Yeah.
football. It was soccer. It was all of it. And they were both very athletically oriented when they were young, and to this day are huge, huge sports fans. So we enjoyed that earlier, and now they enjoy coming here to Gilroy and visiting. They I made a choice with my wife when we bought our house to have a pool with a nice backyard, because that would be a magnet for my older kids, and it worked.
Yeah.
So they have lots of reasons to want to come and visit, and if that's what it takes, so be it, to come and see the old man every once in a while. But really enjoy that and enjoy our life here in South County. It's very different from where I've lived before. But as you know, a Gilroy native yourself, once you get off the headache that 101 South can be, this is a small town with a lot of small town values. And while it's growing, it still has that feeling of the way I spent a lot of my years growing up in a smaller community. And I love that.
Yeah, Gilroy's great. I mean, you'll never hear me say a bad thing about Gilroy. Obviously, growing up, it has its goods and bads. But man, I love going back and seeing my parents. I love going, and we're gonna do it right now. We're gonna go to the pumpkin patch with my parents. It's gonna be great to do because you got to keep them involved. And maybe one day we'll get a pool, and I'll have the girls come back and say, "Hey, we have a pool." Though in San Francisco, I don't really think you need a pool.
No, I won't be pumpkin patching, but I will be wine tasting.
Beautiful. All right, Randy, I appreciate you taking the time. We're getting ready, a few days away from dropping the puck here, and I can't wait. And it's going to be another fun season for the San Jose Sharks, and hopefully with way more wins.
See you on the pregame show, my friend.